Welcome if you're just joining us. This is the France 24 debate. We're discussing the situation in Iraq, whose divisions sometimes mirror those of the wider Arab world or the wider region. As it opens an Arab League summit, first one in the Iraqi capital in 22 years. With us to talk about it from Baghdad, former diplomat, director of the Iraq Foundation for Development and Democracy, Hassan Atiyah. Daniel Serwer of Johns Hopkins University's Middle East Institute is in Washington. Walid Fares at National Defense University in Miami, Florida. And Mehdi Lebouacher of the French news agency AFP, worked out of their Baghdad bureau from 2005 to 2009. Just a comment for you from the France 24 debate Facebook page, where we asked you earlier, can Baghdad play host as sort of a neutral turf for a divided Arab world? We were talking before the break about how the Iraqis trying to stay unaligned. Doubtful, says Davey, particularly since Baghdad itself is capital of an entity which continues to paper over its cracks. As we were saying just before the break, Mehdi, less and less so, it seems. What with, as you pointed out, the Sunni vice president forced to flee to the semi-autonomous Kurdish provinces there.
Yeah, the Sunni population is more and more afraid, and what's interesting right now is to see how Mr. Maliki is counting more and more on the extremist faction of his government. And the Shia extremists that were blamed to play a major role in the killings between 2006 and 2010. So this is a very dangerous path for Mr. Maliki, because he cannot rule the country without everyone. And what is even more dangerous is that he kind of renounced or never implemented a power-sharing deal that was signed in 2010 with the Sunnis, with Mr. Alawi. And this is a big challenge for Iraq in the next year.
All right, so no power-sharing deal, no more U.S. troops. Daniel Serwer, your reaction to what Walid Fares said before the break, Nouri al-Maliki, in words, distancing himself from Iran, and Walid Fares saying that when you read the Iraqi press, there's the sense that those are words, not deeds.
Well, I think Maliki clearly has to get on well with Iran. He gets a lot of support from Iran, and people who support him get a lot of support from Iran. He's not going to abandon that support. At the same time, he does seem to me to be reaching out. The visit to Kuwait is more significant than it appears to Americans. Maliki in the past has been very belligerent about issues between Iraq and Kuwait, and they seem to have patched up a good number of those issues, and that's really quite a positive development. I think it's much more important than a non-resident Saudi ambassador, for example. But Maliki has a long way to go before he can reconstruct the kind of broad support that the power-sharing agreement might have afforded him. He seems inclined to govern without it. He seems inclined to govern in a more majoritarian way, something which a lot of us are very skeptical he can do. But if he can't, he'll fall. And if he falls, they'll form a new government. The big problem in Iraq has never been so much to bring down the government. That you can do. The big problem is to construct an alternate majority. That has proven extremely difficult to do.
We can call up a map of Iraq and show you, again, for those who don't follow it very closely, the delicate balance between majority Shias, but who are mostly in the south there, the Sunnis and the Kurds who are in the north. No shortage, by the way, of rowing right now between Baghdad and the Kurds over oil and who reaps the benefits from that. Ghassan Atiyah, is this insoluble, or can Iraq be governed?
This is a very interesting question. I think what we are witnessing today will last with us for quite a long time. However, no regional power has interest in having Iraq immersed in another civil war or break down into 3 states or whatever it is. So this is a positive factor to maintain the stability in Iraq. In addition to that, the huge oil reserve and revenue, plays a very important role in trying to appease or trying to solve our problem. The new budget, which has just been authorized by the parliament, allocated 70 to 75% actually for administrative purposes, not for investment. This is mainly for salaries for the army and those working with the government. So they can continue with this and they can live with this. However, to break up this deadlock with the present situation that's extreme Sunnis, extreme Shiites in this way, this will be very difficult to reach a state of tranquility and stabilization, which is a prerequisite for development and providing other services. Thus, I feel we have to wait and see how the Iraqi will be able to create or to establish new secular forces in Iraqi society and make use of the next election in 2 years' time. So we'll have new forces which could play a role or the balancing role in the future of Iraq. Otherwise, this state of instability, or rather an accepted level of instability, will continue for quite a long time in Iraq.
Walid Fares, you were talking a short while ago about Iran's influence. The Wall Street Journal this Tuesday describing the north as a region where Turkey has more sway than Baghdad. Do you agree with that assessment?
Well, all the neighbors of Iraq have a sway inside Iraq to certain proportions. You were showing that map, very interesting, for Westerners to look at the map. They'd say, well, this looks like Switzerland or Belgium in Western Europe. With one big difference is that France, Germany, and Italy do not send, jihadists or nationalists into Switzerland. So is the case with other places in the West. What is happening in Iraq, seen from the outside, is that local players inside Iraq either are supported by or have a problem with trans-border nations. For example, the Shia community, the political establishment that rules the Shia community, not entirely the community. Of course they have a support from Iran, there's no doubt about it. The Sunni side, some of the more Salafi Islamists, have support coming from a variety of countries, including from the Gulf and elsewhere. The Kurds in the north, coming to your points, well, certainly they have relationship with the Kurds in the 3 countries surrounding them. That will be Iran, that will be Syria, and of course that would be Turkey. And because of that, the Turkish government, any Turkish government, this one, the previous, and the next ones, always has an interest in making sure that there is no anti-Turkish, Kurdish-based, North Kurdistan-based movement against them. So the regional context of Iraq is very much more complex than any regional context of any multi-ethnic society in the world, I would say.
Later in the week, there's going to be a summit between Iran and Turkey. Neither of those countries, obviously, members of the Arab League. What do you think the fly on the wall will hear regarding Iraq at that summit?
Well, obviously, and without any hesitation, first point on the menu is the Kurds, because inside Turkey, you have 12 million Kurds. There are bases inside northern Iraq that claim that they want to support them. Inside Iran, there are about 7 million or more Kurds with an adjacent border with Iraqi Kurdistan. So for both nations, they have a converging interest to make sure that northern Kurdistan or northern Iraqi Kurdistan is not going to be a base for insurrections in both countries. In addition to that, you have the Syria issue. The Syria issue meaning Turkey is supportive of the mostly Sunni opposition in Syria. Iran is supportive of the regime. And they are trying to find a modus vivendi so they're not clashing, not just in Syria, but also across their own borders. So a lot of things on their menu.
And regarding Syria, Iraq has said it aims for this Arab League summit to be one of propositions, not necessarily one of resolutions, always with an eye to avoid any sort of backlash?
This is what we fear, actually, of spillover.
Yeah.
We do everything not to have that scenario of rising sectarianisms, rising fundamentalism, rising terrorism next door, or the collapse of law and order. Definitely it will create a spillover.
Daniel Serwer, what's the spillover effect of what's happening in Syria for Iraq?
Well, I think it's really very complicated because you're seeing some fighters and some weapons being provided from Iraq to Sunni rebels inside Syria, at the same time as you're seeing the Shia-dominated government in Baghdad supporting essentially Bashar al-Assad, though not supporting him 100%. And then you're seeing the Kurds trying to play a kind of balancing role and trying to make sure that the Kurdish population of Syria doesn't suffer the kinds of attacks that Homs and other cities have suffered. So I think you're not getting a unified signal out of Iraq. You're getting a multiplex signal out of Iraq, which must be very difficult on the Syrian end to understand what's going on.
Mehdi Lebuachera, what Daniel Serwer is describing sounds like Lebanon, not Iraq.
Yeah, and what is interesting is that we see now a reverse phenomenon, because if you remember back in 05-06, the worst period of the civil war in Iraq, there was Baghdad was accusing actually Damascus of letting jihadists cross its border to Iraq, and now we see the contrary happening. So it's a very porous region, and the big question now is: will Baghdad do everything it can to stop the jihadists to go back to Syria? Does it has an interest to stop the flow? Will it stop the flow? And that region, the border between Syria and Iraq, is very, very porous. Like everything can go and in and out.
You covered the civil war in Libya. Mm-hmm. Is it the same people that are sort of moving around? One day they're in Iraq, the next they're in Libya, the following they're going on to Syria?
It's very difficult to say, but it's very not. It's unlikely the case because the Al Qaeda in Iraq. Like the number of foreigners, Arabs, that were in Iraq were the head of Al-Qaeda, and the vast majority of Al-Qaeda people were Sunni supporters. So, like this is Iraqi. The Al-Qaeda has become an Iraqi component, a group made by Sunnis.
Walid Fares, Iraqi Sunnis blamed for the bombings in places like Damascus and Aleppo in Syria recently. How organized are these jihadists, and are they really moving around? How much are they moving around in your view?
It's interesting that you mentioned, or the panel mentioned, how the Assad regime a few years ago had opened the path of their borders to jihadi Salafi Sunni coming from a variety of countries, including from Libya, including from Lebanon, and oddly enough, through Syrian borders into Iraq to strike against coalition forces and Iraqi government forces at the time. Now we have to understand that there was a convergence of interest between Iran, Syria, that are a coalition on the one hand, and the jihadists who are maybe connected with Al-Qaeda on the other hand, to make sure that the Americans and the coalition will leave. Now that they have left, there is a race between those two forces. Jihadi of Al-Qaeda and the other Salafists are now turned against Assad. So their bases, the ones they've established in Iraq, are now being used along with the ones in Lebanon to strike inside Syria. And to answer your question, if the jihadist networks, not just Al-Qaeda, Al-Qaeda is just the center of that, but the web is much bigger. If the jihadist networks are connected, of course they are connected. They have each other's cell phones, emails, IM, Facebooks, certainly. But those who do the operations are of two kinds quickly. Those who are residents, meaning the branch of the jihadists in Syria, usually do not go away, stay in Syria. Same for Iraq, same for Libya. But you have the international brigade, those who actually travel and strike. It all began in the end of the 80s and in the 90s in Afghanistan. This international brigade is basically connected to Al-Qaeda.
Ghassan Attia, listening to this conversation, as we see the situation inside neighboring Syria, what are citizens in the neighborhood where you're sleeping tonight think about it all?
Well, what's happening in Syria will have a direct impact on Iraq. However, the last development with the Kofi Annan initiative, this will seem for the present Iraqi government a perfect solution to a very difficult problem, because if the situation in Syria ends into civil war or the emergence of Sunni Muslim brothers in power, the Iraqi will consider it as a peak imbalance and for the government, and thus will embolden the Arab Sunni in Iraq to be more aggressive in their attack to the government. So whatever happens in Syria will affect Iraq. However, the Iraqi government, the Maliki position, by trying to accommodate the Arab position, and now he is lucky again with having the Kofi Annan initiative to find a compromise without insisting on the demise of al-Assad himself. This is a perfect solution for Baghdad government. In addition to that, any solution in Syria which is based on a compromise could be a good example to be emulated by the Iraqis. And this is something looked upon by so many Iraqis, the moderate ones, hoping that the Syrian will come to a solution which based on a mutual concession on each party, and this will create a precedent which will affect the Iraq situation.
All right, so
and the opposite is true.
All right, so compromise in Syria could be an example for Iraq. We'll leave it there. I want to thank you, Ghassan Attia, for joining us, Daniel Serwer in Washington, Walid Fares in Miami, and Mehdi Lebouachera here in our studios in Paris. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate. Stay with us. Coming up next, it's time for business. Will Edwards tells the tale.
Welcome to Zagreb. Next year, in July, Croatia will become the 28th member of the European Union. What's the mood in the country? What will this change for Croatians, for Europeans? We find out in Europe District.
Don't miss Europe District, Saturday 1:10 p.m. Paris time on France 24. France 24 presents The Observers. Get a different view of the news. Yours. Photos, videos, and on-the-spot eyewitness accounts verified by our journalists and published on our website.
Welcome to the France 24 Observer.
The Observers. It's also on TV, with webcam reports from our observers around the world. The Observers, an interactive network of some 5,000 people. The Observers. It's them, it's him, it's her, and you can be part of it. Find out how at observers.france24.com. You too can be our eyes across the globe.